Holy God, may your word be spoken, may your word be heard. Amen.
Amen.
Please be seated. This Good Shepherd Sunday has a history in the church. I don't know how far back it goes, but certainly the image of Jesus as the Good Shepherd is an ancient one, going back to our earliest ancestors in the faith. But it was not an innovation for our Christian ancestors of that first and second generation to connect a holy, righteous figure with the shepherd. That image goes back to David and back to the prophets, centuries before Jesus came on the scene. Our ancient Israelite ancestors in the faith had a sense of what a good shepherd was about. They were someone who cared for the least among society. They cared for those who were on the outskirts of the community. They cared for, in biblical terms, the widow and the orphan and the stranger. The Good Shepherd looks out for those who need help and brings them into safety, into community, into wholeness. So when Jesus is being called the Good Shepherd, or calls himself the Good Shepherd, he's calling on this tradition, this prophetic tradition of God's love for the least among us. God's love for the least among us. And it's not obvious what this means, I think. I think we get caught up in what it means that Jesus is our good shepherd and that Jesus is looking out for us and caring for us. And I think from our gospel today, we know that Jesus recognized this is not an easy thing to understand. Jesus used this image, the gospel writer tells us, but they did not understand. So he tried another. That's like, to me, real-time commentary from an observer of this dialogue, this sermon that Jesus is offering. And it should cue us in. This is not simple or straightforward, this idea, this religious idea that Jesus wants us to take to heart and wants to let change our relationship with God and with one another. So let's pause. Let's pause with this idea and kind of dig into it and see where it takes us. See where it takes us. So Jesus is talking in the first part of the gospel reading to his listeners that there's the gate and there's the shepherd and the sheep. And the shepherd, the good shepherd, goes in and out of the gate and the sheep follow because they know the shepherd. They trust the shepherd. They know the shepherd loves them and cares for them. The gatekeeper lets the shepherd in and out and the sheep follow. It keeps up with this good shepherd image. But something about the way that the people were hearing this must have set Jesus off. He's like, they're missing the point. They're missing the point. And I need to change this so that they understand. Here we are on Good Shepherd Sunday, and in our gospel reading, the image of the Good Shepherd isn't quite right. It's misleading us in some way. It's misleading us in some way. And then Jesus does this strange twist. And he takes the scene, right, but he invests another part of the scene with his presence, with his mission, with his truth. First, he's the good shepherd, right? He goes out and in, and the sheep follow him. There's this line before that, or maybe after, about the shepherd laying down his life for the sheep. Jesus looking ahead to his death in Jerusalem. Remember, we're in the middle of his ministry here, even though we're after his ministry because it's Easter season and Holy Week was 4 weeks, whatever. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. He starts off invested in the image of the Good Shepherd, and then he shifts, and he says, I am the gate. I am the gate. Now that's intriguing to me, because it's not clear what it was that his listeners were misunderstanding. It's not obvious, but one thing that we could easily imagine, based on where Jesus goes, is that they were kind of identifying the human figure of the Good Shepherd with what Jesus was teaching them about. And so the fact that the Good Shepherd takes care of the sheep, maybe they were starting to get the idea, oh, Jesus is going to take care of us. Jesus is going to take care of us. So we don't need to worry about anything. If they had thought it all the way through, that image of the Good Shepherd lays down his life for the sheep might give one pause. How is the Good Shepherd going to be there for us in the long term if they lay down their life to protect us? Right? But they're not thinking that way. They're kind of caught in the moment. And so Jesus breaks that. He breaks that identification by putting himself in the position of something that is inanimate, that is not human, that would be really hard to get caught up and confused about in that sense. And it's very confusing in another sense. Jesus says, I am the gate. I am the gate. Now, it helps that we have another line from Scriptures that will come up next Sunday. Jesus says about himself, I am the way. Gate and way, movement, space, relationship. So we have something to pull on and to play with to try and get into this image and what it's about. But here in this scene of the Good Shepherd, the sheep, the gatekeeper, the gate, he's investing himself now in the gate. Jesus is the way in and the way out to find good pasture and to find life. And not just life, but what kind of life? Abundant life. Not just life, but abundant life. Jesus is the gate. The gate. The way in and the way out. Now, where my mind goes, and I know my mind is peculiar, as has been evidenced multiple times to you all, and will be again, where my mind goes is the gate kind of limits how you get in and out. It limits your access. And that's emphasized in the story. Jesus talks about the thieves, right? Who come in by ways other than the gate. They can't be trusted. They come to steal and destroy. It's the gate that defines right relationship with God and with one another. And by Jesus saying, I am the gate, I can only hear him saying, the way that I am in the world is the way you need to be in the world if you want to find abundant life. I think that's the religious idea, the spiritual idea that Jesus is trying to convey to his listeners and to us all these centuries later, no longer bound by those ancient years in Palestine, but here, present now, with Christ, resurrected and full of abundant life, and inviting us into that abundant life. Let's see if we can bring it home. So this idea of the gate and the Good Shepherd and God's love for the least among us is an invitation, maybe even a challenge, to live a life of compassion and service to others. To not try and lord it over others if we have power. To not seek from others to steal or take what they have because we're afraid we don't have enough. But to live with abundant generosity in the world. That's the gate. That's what it means to follow the Good Shepherd. It's not to be cared for, it's to be like they are. To look out for the sheep to our left and to our right and behind us, so that we're all on the way to abundant life. I think that's it. Really. And to me, that's not so complicated anymore, is it? It's kind of, I don't want to say straightforward, but it's a graspable idea, but it's a spiritual idea. It's a religious idea, which are sometimes difficult to grasp. It's sometimes difficult to grasp spiritual and religious ideas. And sometimes people get caught up in a kind of literalism that leads them astray. I think about pastors at this time who have been inviting their congregations to continue to worship publicly in a time of a pandemic, believing that God, their Good Shepherd, will protect them. I think that's someone who's not understanding the spiritual idea, the religious idea that Jesus is trying to communicate. And I think this religious spiritual idea is in fact the point, the central point. I think if we never gathered again in worship, but that idea was in all your hearts and in all your hearts, and you made it manifest in the world, it's okay. Because it's the point. The point is how we live, friends, how we treat one another, most especially the least among us. So this Good Shepherd Sunday, give thanks for God's love for you, that God entered into this world with you and for you, not to suffer so that you don't have to, but to suffer so that you might know that God's in your suffering too. And thereby you have the love and the dignity to live as Christ did, not returning evil for evil, but overcoming evil with good. And in that we find the way to abundant, resurrected life. Amen.